next to it, right? So in this case, we have server name, we have IP address, we have status interval. We want to, basically what we can do with the label is pretty much that's it. Just name the control. But there is one other neat little thing we can do to give the user a shortcut, and that is what's called an access key. And an access key, if you click on the label here, we're going to go back into our property view, is one of these things where what you need to do is in the text here, you need to put pick a letter, right? And whatever letter that you want to be the access key, you're going to put an ampersand in front of. So in this case, why don't we go ahead and we'll do the N for name. So if we put an ampersand in front of it and hit enter, you can see it's going to place a little line under the N to give the user a visual notification that if you use Alt and then that number, or excuse me, that letter, in this case N, it's going to take you to that control. And the control we're talking about here is, of course, our text box control. All right, so what we need to do now is set what's called the use mnemonic property, which is by default set to true. Because what that's going to do then is when the user hits Alt N, it's going to automatically set the tab to the next control. So the only thing we need to ensure that we do here is ensure that our tab indexes are set up right. And the tab index is when the user tabs through your form, is kind of the path that it takes through all the controls on the form. So obviously when the user hits, the first time the user opens the form, we're probably going to default the focus to this control. Alright? So this should be 0 as a tab index right off the bat, and it is. Okay, so that means this control will have focus right off the bat. The next thing we're going to do is define what control will get tab focused the next here. And we're going to choose our label. So we'll choose 1 here, and then we're going to go ahead and set the text box as 2. Right? So let's go ahead and do the IP address as 3. The actual text box here, this is actually a masked text box. We're going to look at that in a little bit here. We'll put that tab index as 4. And then here, instead of the status interval, we're actually going to do minutes and seconds. Alright? But in order to make that work, what we need to do is actually set the tab the other way. So this will be 16. This will be 17 then, minutes here, as you can see it is. And then this will be 18. Alright? And then we'll put seconds here as 19, which it is. And then as 20, we will put our actual second value here, the numeric value, which is a domain up and down control, which we'll touch on here in a little bit as well. Actually, numeric up-down control, excuse me. So that's kind of, you got to get a little tricky here if you're going to go backwards and put your labels behind your controls, which is what I wanted to show you there. Now, back to where we were here. Let's go back to IP address. This one, how about we use the A there as our access key? So we'll put an ampersand in front of the A, and you're working in the text property when doing that. And then the mins, how about we use the M there? You got to be careful not to cross, because if you have two M's, you know it's going to choose the first one, obviously. So that's why you got to be a little careful when you choose what your access keys are going to be. Make sure they are unique. All right, and then we'll choose the S here for seconds, and that should do it. Now, just to make sure all that works here, let's go ahead and hit the Run button. And by default, you can see it doesn't show anything, and that's because you have to hold your Alt key down, and then with your Alt key held down, it'll highlight all your access keys. So now if we hit N, look at that, it takes us to our server name. If we hit A, it'll take us to our address, and if we hit M, it'll take us into our status interval for minutes here, and then so on and so forth. So the access keys, that's how it works. It's pretty much the only thing to do with labels outside of giving your controls names. Of course, labels do support events. So if you need to, for whatever reason, to do something, if a user clicks on a label, you certainly can. And all the other events that are pretty standard across the controls, labels support as well. So even though they are used for minimal things, you certainly can pretty much do whatever you can think of with these labels. Now let's move on to link labels here, which pretty much function the exact same way as labels do, except that they have one special little feature. And if we go back into our About form here, you'll see that we have a link label, which will, when clicked on, will take us to www.cbtnuggets.com. And really, the only difference here, of course, is we have all the link functionality. And really, you get just some extended properties here that all have to do with the link color, the link area, link behavior, link visited, and then we have the visited link color. So just to go over these here, the link area is by default going to be, of course, the pretty much the entire label itself. If for whatever reason you want to trim it down, and this is basically the area that will turn into a hand so you can click on it. So it'll actually treat it as part of the link. So this kind of gives you control over what you want to make, you know, basically the hand icon, right? Or whatever icon would be when you put your mouse over a link. And of course, then of course I would define its clickable space as well. Now the link behavior can either be basically what happens when you put your mouse over it, right? Is it going to underline? Is it going to hover the underline, never underline, or the system default, which in our case is going to be always underlined. As you can see, the link is underlined right now. The link color is the link color when it was not visited. In link visited, of course, you're going to leave this false until the user clicks on it. When the user clicks on this button or this link label here, we're going to turn this to true, and then it will obviously change the color down here to the visited link color. And now you actually are control over the navigation. So this is really just a label. It's just that the user can click on it, and it also gives them the whole visual representation of a link. But if we double click on it here, we're going to go into the click event, and here's how you're going to navigate to a website. You're going to use process.start and then pass in the actual URL, right? So this can be hard-coded in here. In this case, we're just stripping the the text right off of the product company site right up here, and it's going to travel right to www.cbtnuggets.com. And by the way, if you want to use the process class here, you need to import system.io. This will give you access to all of the classes within system.io, which work with things such as writing, working with the disk, doing input-output stuff, writing to files, reading from files, reading to disk, writing from disk. And then, of course, you have this process object, which you can use to start, stop, and manipulate processes. So that's why we imported that, and now we have access to it. And we just do a process.start, and you can pass in the anything here, a file name if you want to shell out an executable file. If you want to shell out to, in this case, this will just, once it notices that it's a URL, it's going to fire open Internet Explorer and take us there. And you can see the second line then is we're setting their link label here to link visited equals true. So that'll, of course, give the visual representation that the link was clicked by changing it to the link visited color. All right, so let's save all this. We'll close out of our code window here. And by the way, actually, just to show you there, get you back into this. Our about form in the load event, we're loading up the text property of all of those labels up here. The product name, the product version, and the product company is going to equal, instead of hard coding that information in, we're attaching this to my.application.info.productName, my.application.info.version, sending it to a string so we get the whole version, and then company name.toString. And where it reads all this information from is in my project, and then within the main form here, within your application tab, the assembly info button. If you click on assembly information, here's all the information that you're going to want to fill out, because this will be stamped onto the file, and then obviously then anything in the application class that I'm using here will be filled out, so you can reference it. So now if you change it in there, it'll dynamically change within the about form. So just wanted to point that out there. Let's go ahead and close out of the code window and close out of our properties window, and we'll hit the run button, and let's go ahead and hit our about button here, which will fire open it, and you can see I expanded the form as well here, so it looks a little better. We get the whole product name, version, and company. And now if we click on our link label, it's going to take us to cbtnuggets.com. Look at that. Alright, so there it is, and now look at this. It looks like the link has been visited. So that's how link labels work, and they're easy to work with, they're fun to work with, and they're great for about boxes and putting URLs, support URLs, emails, things of that nature in. Now, I just want to briefly talk about checkboxes and radio buttons, because there's really not a whole lot you can do with them other than work with when they click on something. When they click on one, you can do something at that moment, or you can just let users flip things on and off, and when they hit the save button, you're probably going to check its status and then save it to the database, right? So in the case of this here, for instance, monitor server status, which is basically enabled. If we're enabling this specific SQL server to be monitored, then they would put a checkbox here. Well, the change wouldn't go through until we hit the save button. We were to save this to the database. We would read this and then pass it along into the database, right? So clicking on it by itself isn't going to do anything. You can turn it on and off all day. It's not going to do anything until you save your changes. The difference here is that the radio button, that might be a little different, because in here when we click on users, it's going to fill it up with users. When we click on databases, it's going to fill it up with databases, and vice versa. So in this case, with the radio button, it is going to do that way. One thing you do want to do with your checkboxes and radio buttons is set your defaults, right? So, and we're going to do that here programmatically when we get there, is we will set up our defaults to be whatever. With radio buttons here, let's go ahead and say users, for instance, here. So we'll go ahead and click on our users radio button, and we'll go ahead and just choose it as checked. There we go. Now we have a default on our radio button, even though that really won't matter which one it is in our case. We'll go ahead and do it anyway. And if just to show you our options form here, you can see our options form has all checkboxes and radio buttons. And you know, a lot of times too, if we create a preferences file for options, we're going to read these in when the application loads or when this form loads when they click on it, and it will dynamically fill in the values. So when we create that preferences file, we will default the preferences file, and things will just happen automatically. We don't have to, you know, hard code things defaults in here, which is never, you know, a great thing to do, because if you ever need to change the default, then you're going to recompile and redeploy the application. It's much easier to change something like a preferences file than you know, the application itself. So, and the code itself. So really, that's how it goes here. If you want to, you can, though. Let's go ahead and just we are going to do this just for the sake of doing it here. So I'll go ahead and click on our status users and databases. Checked is going to equal true, and we're going to set both of these at the same time here, because that's going to be the default. The default is going to be monitor everything, right? And of course, show notifications is also going to be a default, so we'll keep that checked. And then we'll leave start with Windows unchecked. That we should leave up to the user. We don't want to just automatically plant users inside of their registry so they kick up that they'll think it's a virus or something. Never a good thing to do. But so that's pretty much all you can do with checkboxes and labels, checkboxes and radio buttons when you get the interface going initially, is set their defaults. And of course, the hard part is figuring out what options you're going to give the user within the application. Now let's take a look at text boxes and masked edit text boxes, and also numeric up and down and domain up and down controls. These are all controls that users are going to use to enter data in. And in our applications case here, when the user wants to create a new server, they're obviously going to have to type in a name for them to recognize the server by, and this could be the actual name of the SQL server. They're definitely going to need an IP address, because that's what we're going to need in order to find the server to run whatever we're going to run against it, to pull down its status and to get its users and to get its databases and all that information. So that's going to be a required field, no doubt. Actually, these are all going to be required fields here as far as server name and IP address goes. Text box, again, there's really not much you can do other than set it up so the user can enter data into it. Really, the things you're going to want to ask yourself with a text box is, number one, is it going to be a password text box, right? That's an easy one to really understand here. And if it is going to be a password text box, you can put a password character in here. Meaning, and if we put an asterisk in here, that just means anytime text is entered into this, it's going to show up as this character here, a password char. And although we can still access the actual text that's being typed in, whether if it's a password, for instance, through the text property, even though it's not going to be displayed, you can see it that way. So if we display some default text here and hit enter, you can see it's going to display it all as asterisks. So I'm going to go ahead and remove that out of there, or remove our password char out of there, because it's really not. And one other thing I want to mention about that, though, is there's also a use system password char. And what this will do is this will default to the system password character, which in our world, in the Windows world, is probably most of the time going to be what I just showed you there, an asterisk, because that's what Windows uses when you log in. So that's what this will do. And by the way, if you have both of them turned on, use password char, and you have this password char entered, it's going to use the use system password character here. This one is actually overrides the other one. Other thing you'll do with the text box here is, if it's a description or comments or something that's going to require multiple lines, what you're going to do is you're going to set the multi-line property to true. And what that'll do is, as I showed you in a previous video, will allow you to size the text box to a much larger size so you can enter multiple lines into it. If it's not multi-line, obviously, it's only ever going to be this height here, and you can make it as much width as you want, but it's only going to ever have one line in it. And if it does have multiple lines, you can either access the entire block of text using the text property, or you can use the lines property here, which will bring you back a string array of all the lines. So you'll be able to loop through them or do things line by line against the text box. All right. Another one that's important that we're going to actually use here is there's a read-only property. And what this will do is this will make the text read-only, so the user can still click in it, copy the text, do all that kind of stuff, but they won't ever be able to change it. It'll be locked in there. And really what you'll get there is the text box will still have a white background, so it's not disabled. Disabled, everything goes gray, right? And theoretically, I'm not sure if it's true, though. I don't remember off the top of my head, but you shouldn't even be able to put your mouse in there or copy text or anything. If it's disabled, you can't access it. Where if it's read-only, you can still copy the text, work with the text. You just can't change the text. All right? Don't quote me on that, though. Now, this one we're actually going to use because this is useful here. When a user clicks on a SQL Server and fills in the details, they have to click the Edit button in order to go into edit mode, right? So this will actually be used